Alright, it's no secret that Bud Light is screwed up royally. We already know this. I'm not going to hash through all those details, and I'm not going to approach this like everybody else that's doing their niche thing when they want to talk about very certain things, because there's a lot of things that people aren't paying attention to, and especially if you're running a business, you need to watch this. I'm going to break down what really needs to happen here, because right now it's damage control. And I'm pretty sure we can all agree that how they're handling it is not the best way, especially if you are in brand and marketing. You might find yourself agreeing with some of these things, if not all of them. And so what I want to go ahead and do is approach this from a very professional place, looking at what's really going on, how I would solve it, and I'm also going to answer what gives me the authority to even say something like that and come to you with this kind of idea, because I have actually been building brands for 23 years, from personal brands to business brands, from Miami, New York, LA, and I actually have clients overseas. And so I'm going to come to you guys with my experience on brand positioning, brand development. I'm also the CEO of a company called Bespoke by Bordeaux. As you've seen, my name is Justin Bordeaux, aka B-Boy Geauxst, and building culture and brand is something that's just been my thing, and I've been doing it a long time, and I love what I do, and I love engineering the solutions, because the solutions that I engineer, I do in two ways. One, I help personal brand leadership, and that's building personal brands, protecting your reputation, things like that. And so in this capacity, we're going to talk about leadership, because this is about executive leadership, executive coaching, and that's kind of a shorter way to say what I do that many people are familiar with. Now, the other thing that I do is brand optimization. I do full level, high-end brand engineering. Brand strategy is the creative stuff. Brand engineering and optimization is looking at the entire silo. And I'm mentioning all of this because we're going to go ahead and use my model that has helped build brand power for other companies, because there's some other things that is wrong here with the entire approach. So let's get into this. Like I said, I'm going to come to you guys from a very professional place. The way that I would do this if I was CMO over there, because it's damage control right now. This is the big thing. There's a lot of damage control that needs to happen here. And before we get into all the solutions, I'm going to talk about brand equity, the things that really base the foundation here, because there's a lot more going on underneath the surface that you really need to be aware of. Starting with, well, let me start with this. Brand equity. To really truly build brand equity is a two-part situation. The company will set their value, but the consumer will either confirm or reject the value that you put on you. Your brand equity will go up when people see value there. Think of it like stocks. For building brand, there is an ROI behind everything that you do. And so let's get into one of the very first things, and that is the ESG score. Yes, I purposefully put a $sign in there because this is something backed by BlackRock, one of the big investment firms that is politically leaning. I'm not going to get too far into them because for some reason I have this idea that they're probably going to try to block this video anyway. But what you guys need to understand about the ESG system, the environmental, social, and governance kind of law and order, if you would, is that this was created in a way for companies to say, hey, we want you to abide by our standards on what we think personally is ethical. But that's the problem. You've got different people arguing different things of what they think ethics is. And so they have it very wrong, because this has to do with toxic inclusion, which we'll get into a little bit more later. But the ESG score in this capacity for social is that what they want to do is, through toxic inclusion, force assimilation and force their ideas on how they think society should go, which is the way that Socrates actually talked about politics in a way that people need to learn how to vote, because voting is a strategy. But some political parties out there want you to remain emotional so that way they can control you. Emotional intelligence is one of the top things for leadership. And so when we can actually disrupt through social engineering emotionally an entire audience, we have power over them, and that way we can influence what a business does. Now, the ESG score is used in many ways for companies to determine if they want to give you money. This is an investment move. This is about power control. Now, I have zero problems with capitalism. I love capitalism. It's fantastic. Where people get it wrong is that they get suckered into consumerism, thinking that they need something when they don't. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, but it comes down to you and taking ownership and responsibility for your own finances. And I'm not here to lecture you, but that's the real case here. So let's talk about one other thing, CEI. Now, CEI was created by a foundation. It's a corporate foundation, the Human Rights Campaign Foundation. Now, this is determining the inclusion and equality of the LGBT community. Now, let me say this right now. I don't care who you're sleeping with. I don't care who you go home with. I don't care how you want to live your life. I accept everybody as they are. Where it crosses the line for me is when you force your ideology onto someone else that says, you need to accept me, respect me. Here's one big problem we have in society today, is that everybody is trying to force validation. And so what we're doing here is that we're forcing our ideals. If you want to live in that space, by all means. Here's another disclaimer for you. This is why, I want you to understand this, is that I have gay business partners. I don't care what you do with your personal life. I care about what you have here. Your character. Show me the content of your character. The most famous words that we all know, or should know. So the other thing with CEI is that both of the CEI and the ESG scoring system is very corrupt because it includes toxic inclusion, it forced assimilation with woke ideologies, it has an $8 trillion stakehold. But before I go down this entire list, let me talk about one thing specifically. The United Nations Global Impact is a voluntary initiative created by a financial board. So, these metrics for equality is organized with the principles of finances and all voluntary. So, if you want to tell me there's no bias here, you're dead wrong. But why am I going over this? It's because this is something that's affecting Bud Light and the entire thing that's gone on here and what's affecting society as a whole. Why I say that is that we're getting confused with what the human identity is. And so let me break that down, because as a mindset executive coach, a leadership development coach, your mindset, your entire identity is something that is very important, because your identity is made up of 10 different things, from your genetics to your economic social status to your education, personal experiences, not just one thing. But in the woke ideology of the world is that people are shutting out all these other factors that create their identity. This is the woke structure, is that they're creating what they can control or think they can control or manipulate on a surface level, ignoring all the other factors that create you, which makes everybody in that space that only creates their identity through their interests and hobbies and only through their sexual orientation or their gender based upon just one tiny factor of everything else. And so this is easy to manipulate by corporations. And if you are in this space and you find yourself emotionally triggered by something, it's time for you to do shadow work. It really, really is. And so what I ended up doing over 23 years is coming up with my own system. It's called the BDX Brand Score. Now, when I go in and I audit a business to optimize them, doing it based only on social, just like we've seen with the two other models, heavily on social, it's unfair, it's biased, and unethical. When we actually want to engineer a brand, what we need to do is actually look at all the components. There's different silos. We need to look at every single silo and the impact they make. We need to give every single silo a brand score. That way it affects the entire brand experience and brand value of the entire organization. Do you think I would have given these scores to Bud Light? There's no way. So we look at their leadership, finance, operations, brand strategy, culture, and marketing. And the thing here is that I would have given them all an F. And we're going to talk about that, because we got a lot of problems and positioning to address. So I have 3 simple rules whenever building a brand. No politics, no religion, and no biased agenda, unless it is part of your original framework. Because if you are in politics, you're going to talk about biased agendas and religion. If you're in religion, you're going to talk about your biased agendas, which is understandable. But if you're a beer brand, why are you And here's the thing, I wouldn't even say I was enjoying a Yingling yesterday, my go-to. I think of just patriotism. I don't think politics. Because you could love your country and hate your government. Because you, being proud to be an American or any nationality that you are, is different from the politics that you sway. So, if you're building a brand, these are the three things to leave out of everything unless it's part of your original framework. Now, this might trigger some of y'all when I say take it like a man. That is not from some chauvinistic, old patriarchal ideology. What I mean is that in leadership, if your team fails, then you failed. What we're seeing here is extreme diverting of ownership. Some of the articles, and here's one thing, I waited this entire time to do a part 2 because I knew the damage control was going to be time consuming for Bud Light as they answer investors and all these other things going on and how they're going to resolve this through their crisis team. They are now blaming a third-party agency for this situation. Really the thing. Just take ownership. Because now it looks like you don't care about what's really needed here, and I'm going to break that down more on what really is needed on how I would actually approach the situation, because I think what they're doing is awful. And when they say this one thing, this is also another thing about diverting ownership. They're saying just one can. But it wasn't just one can. Let me explain. Everybody thinks that this is all about Dylan Mulvaney. It's not. That was one piece of the puzzle, a socially, emotionally, and ideologically charged piece of the puzzle, but it was about an entire campaign. And that campaign came to light when Alyssa Heinerscheid destroyed the trust and insulted every single Bud Light, Budweiser, and sub-brand drinker that was behind them. Even if you didn't drink it, you still didn't hate them. And that's where they went wrong. When people felt kind of passive and they didn't really have any favor against or for them, didn't really feel that emotionally charged against them, they went ahead and created that atmosphere, which was one of the big things that went wrong here. And then, let me ask you this. I was actually doing an interview yesterday for a TV spot, and we talked about this. There's no brand values. What needs to happen here is that we need to figure out what Bud Light stands for. What is it? Like, oh, the king of beers. And then we have these condescending commercials that come out as like, don't ruin chicken fry for me by putting out a commercial just to pander. It's just the wrong thing to do. And so one thing that needs to happen here is that there needs to be clear brand values created here, because they're not. And the other problem here is market share. You know, I know that the last time I looked at this, it was $5 billion, and sales have declined majorly. And I've gotten some arguments from some people, or some debates from people on some of the posts that talk about, well, it's seeing a resurgence in Thailand. We'll get into that here in a second. But with a $6 billion loss, we're seeing shares go up. Now, some things aren't being reported in some areas, and it just looks this way on the surface, but the numbers can always be maneuvered. So this here doesn't add to any of the transparency that is needed with the entire audience and customer base. It just looks like they're just trying to make themselves look good for investors. And obviously that is always a goal, but at what cost? Because $6 billion is a lot to lose with sales declining, and you're saying 50 to 75% off on the beer. But why is it Bud Light seems to have gone up, or Anheuser-Busch specifically, not Bud Light? Bud Light is suffering. Here's one of the things, is that as people are abandoning Bud Light, where do they have to go? They've got to go to other beers. Now, this is a list of all the beer brands. Well, the majority of them by Anheuser-Busch, not InBev. This is the one where people are going to start drinking other beers within the line, not even realizing it's like, okay, they're focused on just Bud Light, but what are the other brands that they're not boycotting? Maybe they're not picking up Budweiser, but maybe they're picking up a Shock Top, a Presidente, a Stella, the ones that you don't really associate at the high end, because we also have people jumping to other brands like Coors. And yeah, I put Smokey and the Bandit, and I put a credit down in the corner here for this photo, because I just got done watching this the other day, but Coors was arguably shit on for so many years. And people talk so much crap about it, about you need to have it extra ice cold because it tastes like crap or there's no flavor at all. Now, whether that might be the case, people are going to it. And regardless if they are, and here's the thing, here's where people are confusing wokeness with actual support. Coors has supported the LGBT community. They've had their cans. But what they're not doing is shoving it down your throat in such an offensive way to some. And so they're just being them, doing their thing. Regardless if you like the beer or not, people have switched. And it's helping them out. And now I see this movie on Netflix. I'm like, okay, there's a movement here. And this is one problem. Because the biggest issue that I want to talk about, one of the big issues I want to talk about is that people have argued that, one guy on my feed was talking about how in Thailand, the sales are up, and ladyboys and sailors from the U.S. Navy are all drinking it with $80 a case going for the beer. Okay, be it as it may, if that is actually, and I've not been able to confirm this sort of story here, the big thing is that what they argued was that sailors and the ladyboys would drink Bud Light and beer by 10 times the amount of any other regular civilian, right? Is it sustainable? No. Is it helping the market here? No. And so it's such a tiny drop in the bucket with people being 60 million people in Thailand. It's not enough. And it's just these sales rumors and nothing's really been confirmed. Because if you want to believe mass media, yeah, you can be convinced of anything. As I mentioned earlier, one of the big issues here was emotional anchoring. And what emotional anchoring is that this goes down to, if you want to really get motivated by anything, and I want to motivate you, I don't believe in motivation. It's just enough to get you off the couch. It's not enough to keep you going. But you have to take massive action on anything that you really want to do, and you have to get emotional about it. Whenever I tell anybody to get angry, I tell them, get angry, that way you can get yourself off the couch. Emotions are one big thing on how we motivate people. But in advertising, here's the thing in marketing and advertising. When you emotionally anchor this sort of issues, let me give you this example. I'm having a lot come in, but with woke boycotts, the reason that they don't last is because those emotions come up and they got to come back down. What happened here with Bud Light was that the emotions went up. You attacked a belief system. You insulted everybody, and so now you've emotionally anchored them. So how do you de-escalate that emotion? That's what we're going to talk about here also, because this is what Bud Light right now is not doing. They're not addressing the core problems. Because if you want to build a brand, you have to look at the psychology and the sociology of anything. You have to understand your consumer. But the other problem here is that, where are the brand guidelines? Who greenlit this? You want to blame a third party? Okay, fantastic. But even, let's say that it's just one can. There simultaneously should have been something gone out with Bud Light and what they're doing. But there's so many mishaps here. What needs to happen now is that there needs to be clear guidelines on what needs to happen, what the brand stands for, because we buy from people we like, respect, and trust. And so where are the brand guidelines? Where's the value? We don't know. But the other thing I want to talk about here, and I believe this is the last part of the problems, is the positioning. So this is a model that I use with my clients, is figuring out where they're at in their business, whether they're just opening their doors or they want to build something bigger. We've got sales, marketing, and branding. Now, branding is the long game. What Bud Light had for so many years was just, they didn't have to touch their branding. It just was what it was. And when we invest money into marketing, we got one of two ways we can go. Marketing money for sales, marketing money for brand. It has two different lanes it can go into. One's qualitative, one's quantitative. And so they were just spending money in sales and marketing. But what they need to do now, and as they've said, they're going to triple down on their marketing costs, which is, this problem is not going to go away by just dumping money into marketing. Now, there's one other thing I want to mention here, is that I understand that, I've heard reports about people kind of, I wouldn't say accosting, but confronting the frontline workers. Look, leave the frontline workers alone. The delivery guys, the distributors, they did not have anything to do with what happened at the high level of the executive decisions. And this is one thing. The decisions you make in the executive spot, in CEO spot, they affect everybody in the company. Now, this is why I say that leadership failed completely, is because they let down their staff. They let down their team, their frontline workers. And so one thing that's come up is that they're giving them each $500 supposedly and helping them on the front line. $500 is a drop in the bucket for these guys. They're making money. They got to feed their family. Have you seen the grocery list? How much a grocery list costs? Like, it's insane how much food is today. $500 is nothing. Now, I commend Bud Light for trying to do something, but they need to do something better. And if you're out there and you're angry at Bud Light, I get it. But don't attack the other people. That's not the way to do this. So just leave them alone. So how do you create value in a brand? There's 3 levels to doing this. There's value 1, 2, and 3. Now, value 1 is the basic problem that you're solving, which is, I'm thirsty, I want a beer, where do I go? I'm going to go and choose all the beers that are out there. I'm probably going to go to Engine 15 where my buddies own it, microbrewery. Go check them out if you're in Jayville. They did not pay me to say that, but I love them and I love their beer, and their nachos are out of this world. Go try them. Because, let me say this though. One of the problems is that with so many different beer companies out there, the one thing that Bud Light doesn't have anymore is that sense of community. And this is actually, I know I'm jumping ahead to value 3 here, because when I go to Engine 15, and every single time I see everybody, it is like Cheers. It is the place, everybody knows your name, and that's the thing that you cannot just recreate with marketing dollars. This is why people love their microbreweries. It's the place where they go. I was actually at an event yesterday, and we were talking about that. The place where you can just go and people know you. Now, the second problem here is one of the hardest things to do is creating value to second layer value. For instance, let's say a CEO calls me and says, "Just, I actually am stressed out of my mind. I don't have clarity, and I need to go ahead and come up with new ways to triple our revenue stream," right? What's his real problem? Clarity and stress. That's his real problem. Money on the surface is going to solve the other problems. What he's really looking for is clarity, and he's looking to relieve stress. He's looking for that emotional relief. And that's one thing that's got to be created here. What's that emotional thing that we can resolve? Well, right now, the tensions are so high with the emotions, no one gives a shit about cheap beer. It doesn't even taste good in the first place. And yeah, that's a dig at Bud Light because it's not that good. You don't drink because it tastes good. So, the other thing that I have here is keeping your own, I've said this before in my 3 rules, keep your own beliefs out of your brand strategy or your marketing strategy. This is where they went wrong. Here's another solution I have for you. Rebuild those relationships. Now, I know that Bud Light and Anheuser-Busch is doing this right now to try to work with their vendors, but they're still, this is the rule in leadership, is that they're not empowering them. They're not supporting them and letting them lead the charge and having them talk to the community. Rather than Bud Light saying, "Hey, we're going to go and fix this. We're going to throw a bunch of money at this." No, get back to basics. Talk to people. Get the community involved. And this is where leadership comes in, because bad leadership, and this is what's going on over there right now. And yeah, I'm calling them out. Now, I'm not saying that everybody there is bad. I know there's some good people there probably, but when you have bad leadership, this is where brand ROI matters, because now you're losing money in the attrition rate for the employees, and then you've got the emotional risk, which is toxic inclusion. So now you've made it an environment. The atmosphere is not a place for anybody that wants to work. And then you stifle innovation and you interrupt operations. As we've seen, they can't sell the beer and they're destroying it because they can't keep it on the shelves, or it's timing out for shelf life, right? And then trust, brand loyalty. Here's the big thing. When I talk about brand loyalty and trust, is that, let's say that I sold you a product one time for $100. Now, you say that, okay, well, that product is worth $100. That customer is worth $100 right now. That's not the goal here. When we actually really look at this, that customer is probably worth $500 to $700. How so? Let's say that I end up selling, let's say they're worth $1,200. $100 every single month with a product that keeps them coming back. As you need more beer, you're going to refill it, you're going to buy some more. Now, that customer is not just that pack of beer. They're the value of the entire year, but actually they're worth more than $1,200 for the year. Reason being is that they're going to have friends. They're going to refer the brand. So the value of that one customer is so much more important. This is what brand value is about. When you build brand, you're building something that's just not a KPI or some hard number where I spend this amount of money on my marketing, this is the conversion that I get back. It goes so much deeper than that. And then when it comes down to leadership, when we lead a brand, there's two ways to do this. There's leading as a brand, leading in a brand. Leading in a brand is basically the fiasco that we see here. They've not done that. Leading as a brand is leading a market. And we've seen that now they've lost some market share. And that's killer. Now, when we talk about market share, do I believe that Bud Light will get it back? Yes, I believe in some cases they will get it back. Do I believe all of it? It's going to be a long time. And they're going to have to prove themselves. Just like you catch someone stealing your chicken nuggets. You're going to take some time to learn to trust them back or anything like that. Now, when we talk about this, let me give you 3 examples of 3 companies based upon a full assessment that I did on each one of these. Now, we've got Disney, Warby Parker, and we've got Louis Vuitton. The thing with Disney is that they've adopted this ESG model where they're pushing one agenda, ignoring everybody else. So as they've adopted their woke ideology, the numbers are in, they're doing horribly. But one thing that they're doing is that they're erasing men as any sort of figure. Now, I'm not against women superheroes. I'm not against women anything as leading roles. I'm looking at this from a very practical point. Is that the equality thing here and the inclusion has become let's erase masculinity in men and call all of it toxic and only bump up one while we push everybody else out, which is actually hurting the entire business. Everybody needs that strong role model. And when we are now taking this and saying that, hey, you know what, let's just get rid of all male superhero figures. Let's change everything since we bought Marvel. It's not helped the company. Now, what I love about Warby Parker led an industry in such a way where they went up against a monopoly. And they disrupted the industry by evolving the industry. I'm going to actually mention that again here later. But then we have Louis Vuitton. Louis, they sell expensive stuff. They've made more money during the last 5 years than anybody else. These guys are crushing it. But they don't care about anything else other than what they do best. They stay in their lane. And we've seen some brands like, I can't remember the one, but they have kids involved. Leave the kids alone. I'm telling you right now, leave the kids alone. If it's not part of your model, leave them out of it. And one thing that Louis has done is that they've done their thing. When we stay in our lanes and do what we're good at, we're great. Here's a solution that I have. I believe that instead of hiding behind all the PR campaigns, I believe that whoever takes over as the new role needs to be the face. I'm not talking about a spokesperson. I'm talking about a real human being that is behind the brand. For instance, Gary Vaynerchuk. He's behind the brand. He's not so much a talking head. He is a face. He is a representation of what VaynerMedia is. And we see this with a lot of other brands, is that the CEOs, the executives, they're out there. Now, I understand that maybe you navigating this from a personal brand place is not your thing, and it doesn't have to be. But whoever takes this role needs to have the voice to go out there and speak and have a backbone and speak and do one thing, listen. But why is this important? One, you have a place to associate something with somebody. What I mean by that is that, let's say that you get physically cut, right? You cut yourself working on your car, you can see the wound. And so what you do, you put a Band-Aid on it or whatever you want to do. You can see that heal physically. But with emotional wounds, one of the problems with emotional wounds is that it's hard for us to heal our emotional wounds because we can't see it. So it actually manifests somewhere else in our body or in our life through a habit or a behavior. So one thing that we need to do is we need to give people someone to associate with the brand rather than hiding. And they messed up with Alyssa because Alyssa was that face in the interview, and she insulted everybody. And that's the problem here. You have to have someone in that position, but someone who's going to pioneer and champion the brand, someone who loves the country, who loves what it flag, but it was someone who loves the beer, loves the brand, and yeah, loves your country, and someone who's behind something that's supposed to be iconic, even though it's owned by another company in another country. So one of the reasons or two of the reasons we want to do this is we're mitigating the risk, we're mitigating the fallout. What we're able to do here is that we're creating tangible trust by having someone that's there. Now, whenever you fly a plane, one thing that you're taught is spatial distortion, is that do not focus on something because you're probably going to hit it. So, when you're riding a motorcycle, anytime I would ride a bike, and there's one thing that we're taught is that you turn your head, that's where the bike's going to go. This is just a basic foundational rule. Same foundational rule here. So, the entire brand strategy for what they're doing needs to change. Now, let's get into the buyers, because this is where everything went kind of awry. Because we've got different ways to build buyer persona. Now, when you're building your buyer persona, a lot of people put the buyer persona in the brand strategy portion, later on the creative, and this is what they did. But the buyer persona must be done at the very beginning of a business. In my brand matrix, I go with leadership right in the middle, and then I actually talk about the business model is one of the first things. The business model is you need to know your buyers. So for Bud Light and anybody else out there running their own business, here's one thing that you need to keep in mind is that, let's say that you're targeting 5 different clients. 3 of those clients are wasting you money, time, and energy because they are not converting. You're spending more money to get more clients that have nothing to do with your brand and not really that interested. And so what we need to do is we need to stop marketing to those 3. We need to align with the 2 that we don't have to convince. But why? It's because these 2 have our shared values and beliefs, and we know exactly who our client is. There's no confusion. There's no guessing games. So the biggest thing you can do is focus on 2. Now, this is not like IKEA. In this specific brand, you have someone different. Now, I know that they want to talk about it's beer for everybody. Well, yes, but we got to get back to what the core values are of the brand, because not everybody's your customer, and that's the problem. Just like the customer's not always right. They're not. Not everybody's your customer. And this is one thing, is that when you want to try to please everybody, you're really getting away from what really matters here. So without me ranting too much about this, let's get into the buyers. The old buyers, the original OG drinkers, the people that still buy Bud Light, we need to understand who they are. Really just lean into it. Now, there's a rule in marketing and sales is that it's going to cost you more money to convert new customers, to bring in new clientele. This is always the goal, yes, but don't alienate your clients. And so in this situation, what needs to happen here? You need to repair the relationship. Just like everything I already mentioned, you need to be honest. You need to get back to basics. You need to get out there. And I already talked about those solutions. So how do we get new clients? How would Bud Light get new clients? Well, don't create new clients. Find the new clients. And it's not a direct hammer approach, just like they were trying to do. So there's basic psychographics whenever trying to develop your buyer personas. Age, sex, sexual orientation, gender, finances, location, all those are all standard. But you also have to ask this question. Going on all the basics, what are their vision and values? What do they believe in? Where are they right now? Where are they at an age? Where are they going to be at 21? Where are they right now in the world? Are they in the South? Are they in the North? Or on the West Coast? And then we also understand the mentality. So if I was to try to create a brand new market for new Bud Light drinkers, I'd go back to find out what always worked. Where are they now? What are they doing? Because the Bud Light drinkers I would go after are probably the ones in college that are drinking a beer they can afford, because I'm not going to go to an Ivy League school where they're going to have milk stout on tap or oatmeal stout or any other like expensive like beer. But I'm saying expensive because I like Dragon's Milk. But I want to know where they're at. Where are they drinking their beer? What are they drinking it for? Are they shotgunning it? Are they doing keg stands? Or are they just they want a beer, but they don't want to get too hammered, or they don't want the calories, whatever the reason being. We also have to understand is that not every college has a high polarity of just differences in beliefs. Find the ones that don't want to deal with anything. They're at 20, you're probably leading the most stressful time of your life. You're trying to get through school. You're trying to avoid all kinds of situations. You're trying to avoid your damage to your reputation, lies, allegations, politics, all those. What do you want? You just want a damn beer. And you got to get people that that's all they want. They just want to have some fun. They want to drink a beer. They want to party. Because in this, timing is everything. Now, when I said that I believe that it's going to take time for Bud Light to actually bounce back, this is one of the reasons I mean this, is that the audience 5-10 years from now is not going to remember this experience. So over time, I'm not going to say that the boycott's not going to work. What I'm going to say is that this is going to transform the business to get back to what really truly matters. And some of the kids out there that aren't old enough to drink yet or just coming around it, eventually, this is about being patient and not forcing a new clientele, but fostering those relationships early in. And there's different ways to do that. All right, let's talk brand basics. Because Bud Light, brand basics. What are we talking about here? So the brand basics are the creative stuff. You can go and find the brand basics from anywhere. You can download it from my website, a templated form on the brand basics, just like you can from almost any agency out there. Hell, you can go to Pinterest and get it. So brand basics, but they still matter. I know you can get it anywhere, but they still matter. Now, what I think that needs to happen here is not only clarity, but clarity on the vision. Create a new vision. And now you have to create different visions. Now, actually, there's a book I want y'all to read. Start at the end. I'm not being paid to promote this, but Dave Levinsky, Start at the End. You need to read this because he actually goes over a very valid point that I completely agree with, and that is coming up with different values. Different values, one value for the company, or vision, a vision for the company, vision for your culture. And so we need to be clear about that and understand that they're different. There's not just one catch-all, and communicate that. And so the other thing here is we need to create a new experience on how, not even just to buy Bud Light, but how to buy beer, how to enjoy it. Any other thing that can go along with that customer's buying experience, their journey, because this is the emotional part of a brand and how you actually do that. Now, the authenticity is one of those things where I advocate this on so many levels. The key messaging, copywriters, everybody on the staff, I wouldn't necessarily say they need to be fired, but there's a come to Jesus moment that needs to happen here with the key messaging. Because the commercials that Bud Light is putting out, I'm here to tell you, Bud Light, this is a direct request, stop putting them out. Because they're not authentic. They're not real. I'd love to see some realness. I'd love to see someone going out there on a vlog style and recording and getting people to get involved. You got to get other people involved. Get yourself out of the way and let good old hardworking Americans that do what they do be the voice. And develop your key messaging organically through this, not crafting it in a war room. Another fundamental question we need to ask here is, who is Bud Light anyway? Who is the brand? Because it's kind of just that quiet person in the room where you don't think twice about them. It's just like, okay, hey, there's Bud Light, let me go ahead and pick up a case, and that's it. You know you're going to have a Super Bowl party, you want to buy a whole bunch of cheap beer, you don't want a $15 case, $20 case, you just want to get some beer, and you just grab whatever. But who's the identity? We would be able to mitigate this and not have to worry about this if we didn't have this entire fiasco. Like I said, this is not about... Dylan is one tiny piece of a massive puzzle, because if you didn't watch the other video, go watch it, but I'll go ahead and recap really shortly right now, is that the entire marketing and brand approach was based upon one ideology. And this is where they went wrong. It wasn't about Dylan, it was about pushing a woke and a feminist agenda. I don't got anything against women of power and grinding and hustling. Do your thing. But it was the alienation of everything else. The blinders, if you would, on the Clydesdales were removed from the Clydesdales and put on Alyssa and the leading staff there. So one of the other things that we need to talk about is the characteristics of the brand. When we think of Harley-Davidson, what do you think of? Exactly. You think of this archetype of just ruggedness and leaking engines. And I love Harley, don't get me wrong, but we have a certain idea on what we think about with that. And this is the thing, what do you think about when it comes to the characteristics of Bud Light or anything else like that? You don't think about it. And we need to be clear about what this is. Even if we don't actually, this is not something that you would actually put out publicly. The authenticity that needs to happen here is that you need to maintain who you are at all times. Instead of pandering, it's like, hey, you know what? We were very strong brand. We were a very funny brand. And now we're going to go ahead and just dim our light to make everybody else happy. Because people have a problem handling their own emotions, and they are triggered by everything, and they don't seek professional help. So let's go ahead and change our characteristics to appease everybody else. Have a backbone in your brand. Know who you are from the start to the end. Okay, sensory branding is something that a lot of people don't actually know about, and they don't think about it. Now, sensory branding is another way for you to just go ahead and create that extra layer of really creating brand power. You know, creating brand, depending on where you're at, it takes time. It always does. You can't build brand overnight. You can destroy it overnight, but if you really want to amplify your experience, you need to get really, really involved with all these other ways of actually building brand. Now, if I was CMO over at Bud Light, I'd figure out ways to do this. Now, with sites, new visuals, I'm not going to refer to the can. I'm going to refer to new cans. What I'd love to see is cans. So you can do a commercial, right? And that commercial lasts for 30 seconds, and you're done. How many millions did you spend on it? Now, if you put a Gadsden flag, or you put something else, you partner with Harley, you partner with anybody. Harley's probably a bad one because of transportation. But you put images on a can, that's product placement. That's going to last forever. That's going to last a long time. And so the visuals here is creating new things, new commercials. But those commercials have got to be funny. They've got to have humor. They've got to have all those core elements that we fell in love with back in the 90s and 2000s of what made award-winning work. Just what was Bud Light. And then that comes down to the sound. What are the new sounds of it? Like I said, do not destroy Chicken Fry and all these other songs because you just are trying to pander. The sound of this needs to be authentic. We need to go back and triggering old sounds. Bring back the frogs for goodness sakes. Bring something back that actually makes people remember. It's like, hey, you know what? There were some good times. We had some good times. Let's drink a beer and talk about that. And then taste, partner with companies. Get your beer. Sell your product any way you can by partnering with companies that will use it. Beer brats. Any ways to get involved. Jack Daniels does it with their whiskey now. And so they've done it for a long time. But I think at Fridays. And then touch is a connecting with people in person. Now, touch in some brands would be like you're walking through the store, you're touching all kinds of items, and your mom says, don't touch that. While she touches it, yeah, I know you've been there. So when it comes down to touch, get things in people's hands. Because all they're doing is reacting from their emotions right now. And so they're disconnected from what really needs to happen. And what needs to happen is that handshake. That product in their hands. And even if they don't drink it, don't throw it down the shelf. Don't throw it down the drain. Get it out there somehow. And there's different ways to do this. This is just a high level without me being involved, but this is some ways that I would start doing this. Smell, partnership. Get crazy with smells. Be ridiculous like you used to with the fratty sense of humor and come up with Bud Light cologne. And I'm saying don't make it smell like Bud Light, but just be ridiculous for one moment. Have some sense of humor. Make fun of yourself. Right now, Bud Light is taking things way too serious. They gotta have more fun. And they gotta start making people laugh. You gotta change the emotional state of your customers if you want them to go from angry to, alright, that's pretty damn funny. Psychologically, what we want to do is self-deprecating in some ways. If I was a Bud Light, I want to make fun of ourselves in some way. That's one of the keys out of this. All right, culture. Culture is one of the most sensitive subjects right now. But your culture is one step over from your leadership. And the problem with culture today in branding is that your brand culture is from the ESG and all these other ideologies is that when we're alienating people, we're doing this through toxic inclusion. There's two different types of inclusion. Inclusivity. So here's the thing, is that I was over at a friend's house one day, and oh wait, no, let me give you a better story. I remember it's actually I'm at a buddy's place, and we're all drinking beer, we're all hanging out, and I saw that there was this new person that came by, and they were kind of sitting there on their own. I'm like, you know what? Let me go shake their hand. I'm like, yo, hey brother, come over here, hang out with us. And then another example of doing this is that whenever you're talking in a group and you see someone hasn't gotten their voice in and they want to say something, stop everybody. Like, hey, Jimmy had something to say. Jimmy, tell everybody what you were thinking. This is ethical inclusion. This is the way to do it. And the other way to do this is that, I said this before on one of the other videos, is that one thing that I would do is have a commercial, having everybody there. You don't know what their gender is. You don't care. You don't know what their religion is. You don't care if it's ethical. But one thing you want to do is just hang out at a lake. Throw your buddies a beer. Guy, girl, elephant, I don't care. What you're doing is that you're just existing. You're not making this about some charged issue because you got a chip on your shoulder. Ethical inclusion is making sure that everybody, not just one group, feels included. If someone wants to be included, you can't force people to just accept everybody else. You can't do it. It's unethical and it's immoral to force someone else's beliefs. And this whole inclusivity is toxic inclusivity is what's pioneered by the CIS score and ESG. And this is what Alyssa ended up doing with her own biased agenda. And one reason we want to actually work on our internal culture is because we're creating brand ambassadors. I said this before, and that comes down to the frontline workers. You want to be proud of where you work. That's the thing. You want to be able to, if you want to go to a networking event, you want to be able to make sure that everybody that goes there says, hey, I love where I work, do business with us. Or even when you meet them in the grocery store, it's like, hey, I saw you wearing that shirt. If you got an employee wearing a shirt on a Saturday, that is some great culture right there. Unless it's their throwaway shirt and they're working on their car. But by all means, get people to be proud of working there by including everybody in the right way. You create brand ambassadors that way. And then, like I said this before, Bud Light needs to stop trying to compete with all the other beer people out there that are the ones that are going to love their drinks. And I joke about this with my buddies on the IPA. They love IPA. I can't stand it. Probably because my buddy fed me hops one day. Mikey, he'll try anything. I ate it. I won't drink anything hoppy anymore. But beer people know what they like. Real beer people. They'll drink what they like. They know what they like and they'll do that. Stay in your lane. At Bud Light, one thing I would do is stay in my lane. Know what really works. Stop competing with everybody else. And what InBev and Budweiser and Anheuser-Busch are doing is that they're buying up everybody. We know this. They buy up all the microbrews because they can't touch that market. It's just going to happen. And we got to know our audience in anything that we do. The other thing here is listen. Send out that brand ambassador. Send out everybody out there. Really understand and get people in. I would actually put together a production campaign, invite everybody in, and record them on camera. What do you think? And start talking, start asking. Instead of trying to tell them what we want to do, what we got to do here is listen to the customer. And listen to every angry Bud Light drinker out there, an angry American that's against the ridiculousness of what's happened to society on the woke agenda of pushing ideologies on the brands. Because it's destroying organizations and everything else. Now, the other thing that we want to do here is changing the environment. Now, whenever, especially in coaching, if I see somebody in a place where they're not growing, what you want to do is you want to get them out of that location. You want to put them somewhere else. I actually did that in school. I don't know how I graduated high school, but I did. But when I went to school, I was in a bad environment. Always making D's and F's, summer school all the time. And then I switched schools, and I don't know how I was making B's. I don't know how, but I did. but I also believe that's possibly because of the environment. I change the environment, I change the people around me, and it helps. So what we got to do here as a beer brand is we got to change not only just the buyer persona, but we got to change how we actually evolve the industry, change the environment of the industry. Think bigger here, go bigger. Instead of playing it safe on the bottom, let's just sell some beer. No, let's change the industry. Let's figure out, let's do this. Even if we fail 50 times, everybody knows that we are working on an infinite plan here, an infinite game. With marketing, stop thinking that throwing money at this is going to make the problem go away, because that's what Bud Light has planned to do here in Q2, Q3, is just dumping money into it. Like I said, we buy from people we like, trust, and respect, and share our values. What are the values? Got to build new values. You don't trust, you don't respect, you don't like Bud Light. Start working on those things. It's that simple. And you got to be real. And what I mean here is that all these crafted messages and these PR campaigns and all these interviews from the journalists to the, and I say journalists because not everybody's an actual true journalist, to just the interviews with the executives. The executives can't relate to the customers. I go to Sebring every single year. My father and I would go out there, we camp out and have a great time, and there's a disconnect from executives down to everybody in Greenfield. And if y'all been to Sebring, you know. And what we do here in this, by not crafting these messages that we can read through as consumers, we avoid hyperbole. We avoid making it sound better than it is, especially with the numbers. We gotta be real and honest here. And like I said, marketing's a money pit. Marketing, a lot of times, is just testing. That's really what it is until you found something good, and then it becomes sales, and it's just churning. And dumping money is not going to fix this whole thing. And again, like I said, with the authenticity is no PR games. Just tell the God's honest truth and have a backbone. Take charge, take leadership. Show us that, you know what, you got egg on your face. I've got hit with baseballs at home plate plenty of times. I got up and I walked it off. And I didn't go back to the dugout. I finished out my set. I finished out swinging. That's what needs to happen here at Bud Light. And stop data stalking. Now, I think it's Tim Pool. Tim Pool, he actually has a video right now. He's talked about this several different times. And he talks about what he calls ElsaGate, or what's known as ElsaGate. What's happening here is that companies are manipulating the algorithms. There's actually another case study where I actually saw this guy. He was talking about his company would actually post controversial things or say asinine things on Facebook because Facebook didn't really care about anything other than the engagement. So the engagement blew up because they were being negative and argumentative and combative, and so they manipulated the algorithm. And this is what companies are doing. They're chasing the data. They're looking at the data. It's like, okay, let me do this to get more exposure. Exposure is everything. Now, I don't think Bud Light, the entire marketing approach was not about just chasing data. Now, it's one thing that they're doing with Dylan specifically. Dylan, because the claims that it was just one can and all this, I don't firmly believe that. I'll agree with Tim in this to a certain degree, but it's about so much more. In business, everybody needs to stop chasing the data. And when you chase the data, you're not authentic. You gotta do the data, chase the data that works for you, but be real about it, unless all you care about is a dollar at the end of the day, and arguably, that's what some corporations, that's all they care about. I go guerrilla. Now, here's a story about Vespa. I know Vespa. I'm not talking about Harley. Vespa did a campaign. And what they ended up doing was they hired a whole bunch of supermodels. And they had them drive from cafe to cafe, park right out front, and would just talk about the Vespas. And these gorgeous women would get back on the Vespas, drive to the next one. And so sales for Vespa shot up because of this guerrilla campaign. Guerrilla campaign, guerrilla PR, as it's mostly known, is just really getting out there, getting dirty. You know, like guerrilla warfare. You got to get out there, get it dirty, and that's one thing that I think needs to happen here. And the other thing that, care about the community. Give a damn. Show that you care. Rather than trying to just save face and be angry and just go on the rampage about how it's everything that you're doing right now is wrong. Care about the community, care about your people. That's one thing here. Care about being a damn American, and the beer that you make it better. So there's actually another formula that I have here and that I use, and this is something that's not uncommon. The way I use it might be a little different though, because when we look at the sales, when we look at the market, we need to be real about this and understand our customers. Here's why the whole approach, when it comes down to specifically this one puzzle piece of Dylan, actually was kind of just an ego thing, I think, for Bud Light, was that 10% of the people that are ready to buy, 10% of the market is ready to buy right now because 90 days they were doing the research, or maybe their beer let up and it's time for them to buy new beer. You got to know which lane you're in. You got to know where your customers are. The 90 days out is going to be the marketing. Right now, sales is terrible. You got to get sales, but how do you get sales? There's a lot of different tactics for that right now, but I'm illustrating this because going into this strategy, it's understanding that the other percentage of the market, now the 90-day percentage fluctuates depending on your market and where you're at, but there's a majority of the people that aren't ever going to buy your product or wasting your time. It's like, I'm going to go to a car dealership and look at a car and I have no interest in buying it. They're just wasting your time, and that happens sometimes. And so we need to be honest and understanding. Is like, hey, like I said, the 5 buyer personas, those 3, get rid of them. Go after the ones that actually matter. Go after the people that want to buy your beer and have the means and are that audience. Now, the last rule that I have, and this is actually the end of this whole thing, be aggressively patient. What I mean here is that, let's say you're going to the gym, you're working out, you got an ideal physique. It's going to take you consistently at least about 1.5 to 2 years to get the physique you want. It's the fact that you know you're working towards something else. Fixing everything right now in the next quarter is so unrealistic for Bud Light. It's understanding that, yeah, you got to fix it. But in this approach to building a new audience, this immediate, quick turnaround approach to marketing, brand, sales, all of it is dangerous. Because that's not how you build brand. You build brand, you build new buyers, you build new loyalty over time. And you aggressively work today, patient about what happens down the road. Alright, so that's my complete assessment of what I would do at Bud Light and what's going on. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Now, I didn't go into full details. Obviously, if I was CMO there, I wouldn't be kicking this out in just a couple days as I did with this. Actually, just 2 days, if not under, just about 2 days to put all this together. Now, give me the time. I'll be able to create something much bigger, much more profound, much more detailed. But this takes out all my own personal beliefs. And again, I'm referring to 23 years of brand expertise on how I would actually go about this. And two things. One, stop listening to mainstream media on everything, on any side. Get the news, do your research, think for yourself. That's one thing. A lot of the companies don't want you to think for yourself. Think for yourself, do your research, buy what you like, buy what you love. This is like a rule in bourbon. Drink what you like. Drink it how you like. That's it. And then the other thing here, leave the kids alone in everything. Unless you're here to foster them and help them, guide them down a moral path, leave them alone. It's time to set an example. It's time to get back to what really matters in brand and business and be real and authentic in everything that you do. Because if you're not authentic, it's going to come crashing down on you one day. So, thanks for watching. You guys visit me at bespokebybordeaux.com, or I'm actually available for speaking engagements and workshops. If you want to visit me at justincbordeaux.com, links are below. You guys got questions, or you have any other brands you want me to cover, let me know. We'll break it down. This is Geauxst. I'll see you later. Thanks again.